We're all watching this incredible arms race to build bigger and bigger AI. But what if the next giant leap isn't about size at all? What if it's about strategy? Today, we're diving into a new framework called Spark that's teaching AI to work smarter, not harder. And it might just be turning the whole idea of AI training on its head.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to unpack the massive roadblock that's been holding AI agents back. Then, we'll look at the old, kind of clunky way they tried to get around it. After that, we'll introduce Spark's brilliant new approach. And of course, we'll look at the cold, hard data that shows it actually works, and talk about what this means for all of us.
So, let's get right into it with the core challenge. They call it the AI exploration problem, and it's the exact puzzle that Spark was built to solve.
To really get a feel for this, just think about how you learn something new. Let's say you're trying a complicated recipe for the first time. Every single step doesn't require the same amount of brain power, right? Some steps are totally trivial, like opening the fridge door. You don't even think about it, it's automatic. But then you hit a snag. The recipe calls for eggs, but there are no eggs in the fridge. Now that's a critical moment. That requires real problem solving. Do you run to the store? Do you find a substitute? AI agents face this exact same kind of dilemma. And that brings us right to the heart of the issue. The big problem with a lot of current AI training is something called indiscriminate resource allocation. Basically, the AI wastes a huge amount of its energy and compute power on the easy stuff, the no-brainers, and doesn't spend nearly enough time exploring the really hard parts of a problem. So if that's the problem, what's the old-school solution? Well, for the most part, it's been something you could call a chain-like search. And honestly, it's a bit like forcing the AI to explore a maze with blinders on. This image really says it all. Over on the left, that's the traditional way. It's a single, rigid chain of thought. The AI tries one path to solve the problem. If it fails, it goes all the way back to the start and tries another single path. It's just brute force. And as you can probably guess, it is incredibly inefficient. And here is what that inefficiency looks like in practice. It's almost painful to watch. This agent needs to find an egg. It checks the fridge, checks the table, checks the microwave, no egg. So what does it do? It checks the fridge, the table, and the microwave again and again. It is completely stuck in a pointless loop, totally unable to think outside the box. So how do we break the agent out of that loop? Well, this is where Spark enters the picture. It's an entirely new strategy that gives the AI the insight to know when it's time to stop, take a step back, and actually think harder. Now, Spark stands for Strategic Policy-Aware Exploration via Key State Dynamic Branching. Yeah, it's a mouthful, I know. But the key ideas you need to remember are right there: strategic exploration and dynamic branching. Instead of just one path, it branches out to explore a bunch of options at once. But, and this is the important part, only when it really matters. Here's the four-step dance. First, it kicks things off with a few different starting ideas, just to get some variety. Then the magic happens: autonomous branching. When the AI gets stuck or feels uncertain, it decides all by itself to branch out and try a few different things. It does all this while staying on budget, computationally speaking. And then, finally, the most crucial part. It learns from all of those branches, the successes and the failures, not just from one single attempt. Okay, so how does it know when to branch out? This part is seriously clever. The agent is actually trained to put a little tag, an explore tag, in its own internal reasoning. You can think of it like the AI raising its hand and saying, hey, wait a minute, the obvious plan isn't working. I need to think about some other options here. It's a signal of its own uncertainty. So let's go back to our agent who couldn't find the egg. The SPARC agent checks the usual spots: fridge, table, no egg. But instead of getting stuck, it generates that explore tag. That triggers it to think of other places an egg might be, like, say, the kitchen sink. It explores that new branch, and bingo, it finds the egg and finishes the task. No loop, just smart, targeted problem solving. Okay, the theory sounds fantastic, but you know, talk is cheap. Does it actually work? Let's get into the numbers, because the data here is pretty spectacular. This chart really speaks for itself. Across a whole bunch of different, really complex tasks, everything from navigating virtual worlds to scientific problem solving, Spark just consistently blows the other methods out of the water. The other bars are the older techniques, and as you can see, Spark is the clear winner across the board. And we're not talking about a small improvement here. When you average it all out, Spark delivers a whopping 73.5% performance boost over those older methods.
That isn't just a step forward, that is a giant leap.
Now this is my favorite slide. It's a true David versus Goliath story. The researchers put a pretty small model, just 1.5 billion parameters, trained with Spark up against a massive model. And on a super complex scientific reasoning task, the smaller, smarter Spark agent didn't just hold its own. It won by a lot. It proves that a better strategy can beat raw power.
And if being smarter wasn't enough, Spark is also ridiculously efficient. It gets these amazing results using only 20% of the training data that the older methods need. That's a 5-fold improvement in efficiency. We're talking huge savings in time, energy, and money.
So let's pull back and look at the big picture. Why is making AI this much more efficient a total game changer? Because Spark is more than just a clever piece of code. It's really a new philosophy for building AI. We're moving away from telling an AI exactly how to learn, and we're starting to build systems that can figure out for themselves where to focus their own brain power, a lot more like how we humans solve problems. So, what does this all mean for the future? Well, it means AI development gets cheaper and faster. It means we can use smaller, more accessible models to solve enormous problems. And maybe most importantly, it means we can build AI that's better at adapting to new things it's never seen before, because it's actually learned how to think. The researchers who created it summed it up perfectly. They said, "Our work highlights strategic exploration's value in advancing capable and efficient agentic systems." In simple terms, it's about making AI that can act more independently and intelligently. It's about making AI that's both more powerful and way more practical. And all of this leaves us with one massive, exciting question. Now that we can build AI agents that explore the world with a strategy that looks a lot more like our own, what are the next grand challenges we can set for them? From discovering new medicines to designing better cities, the possibilities are just starting to branch out.
Today, let's talk about something really cool. It's a new AI model called DeepSeek OCR 2, and it's built on a fascinating idea. What if we could teach an AI to read a document not like a machine, but more like a person? It sounds simple, but this one change could completely reshape how AI sees the world. So let's get into it.
But to really get why this is such a big deal, you have to ask a pretty basic question. When a computer or an AI looks at a picture, what is it actually seeing? Is it anything at all, like how our brains process an image? Well, for most AI, the answer is a hard no.
And this really lays out the difference perfectly. When you or I look at a page, our eyes just naturally follow the meaning, right? We jump from a headline to a caption, over to a picture, all guided by the logical flow of the content. But most AI models, they do what's called a raster scan. It's just a rigid robotic march from the top left corner, straight across, line by line, all the way to the bottom right. Yeah, and that rigid method, it's a huge problem. It completely ignores the actual structure of the document. I mean, imagine trying to read a newspaper that's split into multiple columns by just reading straight across the whole page. It'd be total gibberish, right? Well, that's exactly the kind of challenge AI has been facing, and it's the core problem that DeepSeek OCR 2 is trying to fix. So how do you fix it? How do you teach a machine to read with a little bit of intelligence instead of just brute force? Well, the folks at DeepSeek came up with a really elegant solution. They call it reading with causal flow.
Visual causal flow. This is the big idea. It's basically a new way of thinking that lets the AI figure out the logical path through an image all by itself. So instead of that rigid grid, it's actually following the trail of meaning, just like our eyes do. And this means the AI isn't just seeing anymore, it's learning where to look next.
And this quote from the paper just nails it. The order in which the AI looks at the little pieces of an image, the visual tokens, should depend on what they mean, not just where they are on the page. It's all about seeing with context, not just coordinates.
Okay, that all sounds great in theory, but how does it actually work? Let's pop the hood and take a look inside the engine of this new model, a part they're calling the Deep Encoder V2.
So the main innovation was this really critical swap. The researchers basically took out the standard old-school vision component and replaced it with a brand new encoder that's built just like a large language model, like a GPT. And doing that gave the AI the built-in ability to understand things like sequence and cause and effect.
Now the real secret sauce that makes this whole thing tick is a custom-designed attention mask. You can kind of think of this as the little voice in the AI's head that tells it which parts of the image it's allowed to look at any given time. It's pretty much the brain of the whole operation.
And this mask is so clever because it combines two totally different ways of seeing. On one side, for all the raw visual data, it uses what's called bidirectional attention. That's like taking a step back to see the whole painting at once, just to get the general vibe. But then, for another set of things called causal queries, it uses causal attention, the same kind that powers LLMs, to go step by step and actually figure out the logical reading order.
And what you end up with is this beautiful two-stage process. First, that new Deep Encoder V2 acts like a brilliant librarian. It looks at the messy, chaotic 2D layout of a page and intelligently sorts all that visual info into one single, logical, easy-to-read line. And then, the regular old decoder just has to read that perfectly ordered sequence to understand the whole document. Simple.
So now for the million-dollar question. Does it actually work any better? Well, let's take a look at the results.
The big headline number is this: a solid 3.73% performance jump on a major document understanding benchmark. Now, that might not sound like a huge number, but in the world of AI, that is a significant leap forward, especially compared to its already powerful predecessor.
But check this out. This is even more important. The number of mistakes the AI made in getting the reading order right dropped a lot. This is the smoking gun. It's proof that this new causal flow thing is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's actually understanding the layout logically.
And it's not just beating its old version. When you put it head-to-head with a major model like Gemini 3 Pro using about the same amount of resources, DeepSeek OCR 2 actually comes out ahead in parsing accuracy. So it's not just smarter, it's also more efficient.
Okay, so this is about way more than just a better tool for scanning receipts. The ideas in this paper are pointing towards a much more exciting future for AI. And that's what we need to talk about next. The researchers really see this as a breakthrough on two massive fronts. First, it's a huge step towards what they call genuine 2D reasoning, teaching an AI to truly understand a two-dimensional space, like a map or a circuit diagram. And second, it paves the way for native multimodality, which is the dream of having one single unified AI brain that can understand images, text, and sound using the exact same core logic.
So, when you boil it all down, what we're looking at is a really powerful conceptual leap. This model takes the incredibly hard problem of understanding a 2D image and cleverly breaks it down into two much simpler one-dimensional tasks. It's a genius way to get an AI that thinks in a straight line to finally master the messy, two-dimensional world of vision.
And that leaves us with one last, pretty fascinating thought. This work has managed to teach an AI to read a page with something that looks a lot like human intuition. So it really makes you wonder, if an AI can learn to read like we do, what on earth is it going to learn to see next?
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that honestly sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, a potential mega merger of Elon Musk's entire empire. We're going to untangle all the reports suggesting that Tesla, SpaceX, and his new AI venture could actually combine to reshape, well, pretty much everything.
So let's get right into it. The word on the street is that 3 of the world's most innovative companies, all run by Elon Musk, are in the very early stages of talking about a historic merger. The pieces are definitely moving, and, the implications here are just staggering.
All right, so first things first, who are the key players in this massive potential deal?
Okay, so you've got 3 heavyweights. In one corner, there's SpaceX, the absolute titan of private space exploration. In another, you have Tesla, the electric vehicle and energy powerhouse that totally flipped the auto industry on its head. And the third player? That's the relative newcomer, xAI, Musk's super ambitious AI startup, which, also owns X.
But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just one straightforward plan. Nope. According to reports from both Bloomberg and Reuters, there are actually 2 different ways this whole mega merger could go down.
Let's break these 2 paths down. So scenario 1, according to Bloomberg, would be combining SpaceX and Tesla. Just try to imagine that for a second. A single giant for both space travel and sustainable energy. Then you have scenario 2 from Reuters, which suggests merging SpaceX and xAI. That would create a direct line from cutting-edge AI to the rockets and satellites you'd need to launch it. So you've got 2 very different strategies, but they both seem to be pointing toward one much bigger vision. And that brings us to the big question, right? Why? Why would you even think about combining these huge and, let's face it, pretty different companies? What's the end game here?
Well, the answer is, honestly, it's something straight out of a sci-fi movie. Musk has actually said publicly that he wants to put xAI's massive, power-hungry data centers into orbit. And it turns out both of these merger scenarios would be a direct step toward making that incredible plan a reality. And this is where it all starts to click. Think about it. Combining SpaceX and xAI puts the AI, like the Grok chatbot, under the same roof as the rockets you need to get it into orbit. But then, how do you power the whole thing? And that's where Tesla comes in. A merger would bring in Tesla's massive energy storage business to juice those data centers floating around in space. So, is this all just talk? Just some crazy rumor? Well, not exactly. Let's follow the clues, because there's a paper trail and a money trail that's getting pretty hard to ignore. First up, the paper trail. Back on January 21st, two new companies popped up in Nevada with these super cryptic names, K2 Merger Sub. Now, what does that mean? Well, creating a merger sub company is like step one in the playbook for a major corporate combination. It's a huge tell. Okay, now for the money. Last year, the Wall Street Journal reported that SpaceX, the rocket company, agreed to pour a staggering $2 billion into Musk's AI startup, xAI. And then just this week, it comes out that Tesla, the car company, has also invested, wait for it, an identical $2 billion into xAI. See the pattern here? Yeah, that's probably not a coincidence. So here's the bottom line. You've got these massive identical investments flowing from two of Musk's other giants directly into his newest one. This just screams strategic alignment. It's like the walls between these companies are already starting to crumble. And just to give you a sense of the sheer scale we're talking about, just look at these numbers. SpaceX alone is reportedly valued at $800 billion. That makes it the most valuable private company in the US, period. You start adding in xAI and X, and any merger here creates a corporate giant of almost unbelievable size and power. So, with all these pieces moving, the legal stuff getting sorted, and billions of dollars flying around, where does this all go from here? And things are moving fast. I mean, really fast. January 21st, those merger companies get created. Just about a week later, the news breaks. And now, the Financial Times is reporting that Musk might want to take SpaceX public as early as this June. The clock is definitely ticking. And that leaves us with the final huge question. With a massive IPO for SpaceX possibly just months away, which path is he going to choose? Will he consolidate his empire into one absolute behemoth before going public? And will that path be defined by energy and exploration, or by artificial intelligence and the stars? Whatever the answer is, it's going to define his legacy.
Okay, so Apple just dropped an absolute bombshell on the AI world. We're talking $2 billion. So what did they actually buy? And more importantly, why should you care? Because this could literally change the devices you use every single day.
Yeah, you heard that right. $2 billion. That is a massive price tag for their latest AI acquisition. I mean, a number that big, it's designed to make a statement, right? It's Apple telling the world just how critical this tech is for their future.
And look, for that kind of money, you know it's not just some random startup. For $2 billion, Apple bought a company called Q.ai, an Israeli AI firm. And get this is now the second largest purchase in Apple's entire history.
So let's put that into perspective. You probably remember when Apple bought Beats, right? That was a huge deal, $3 billion back in 2014. Well, this Q.ai purchase is right up there in that same league. It's basically Apple saying, hey, this AI tech, it's just as fundamental to our future as the whole Beats audio empire was.
Okay, so that's the big question, isn't it? Who is Q.ai? And what on earth are they doing that's worth $2 billion to a company like Apple?
Well, at its heart, Q.ai is this really innovative Israeli startup. They've been doing some wild stuff, pushing the boundaries of AI, especially in imaging and machine learning. But the real secret sauce, the thing that got Apple to open its wallet, it's all about audio.
Okay, just think about this for a second. Imagine your phone being able to understand you even when you're whispering. Or you're in a super loud cafe and your call is still crystal clear because it cuts through all that noise. On top of that, their tech can even detect tiny, subtle movements in your facial muscles. We're not talking about small upgrades here. No, this stuff is a potential game changer for how we interact with our tech.
And see, this is where it gets really interesting. This isn't just some abstract AI living in the cloud. Nope, this is all about hardware.
Apple bought this tech for one very specific reason, to basically give superpowers to the devices we hold in our hands or, wear on our faces.
Let's connect the dots. Think about your AirPods. With this tech, they could potentially translate languages live in real time, even if you're just whispering. And what about the Vision Pro headset? It could become way more intuitive, responding to facial cues you don't even know you're making. It all comes down to this, making Apple's hardware smarter and just more seamless than anything we've seen before. But it's not all about the tech and the billions of dollars. There's actually a really cool human story here, a connection that kind of suggests this deal was, in a way, years in the making. It turns out, for the CEO of Q.ai, a guy named Aviad Meisels, this isn't his first rodeo with Apple. Not at all. And the result of his first deal with them? Well, it's a feature millions and millions of us use every single day. So get this. Way back in 2013, this same guy, Meisels, sold his 3D sensing company, PrimeSense, to Apple. And that technology, it became the foundation for Face ID. Yeah, that Face ID. So the man who literally taught your iPhone how to recognize your face just sold Apple the technology that could teach your AirPods to understand your whisper. I mean, what an incredible pattern, right?
Okay, so let's zoom out for a minute, because this move isn't happening in a vacuum. It's not just about Apple. This is a huge strategic play on a much bigger chessboard, the global race for AI dominance.
There's this quote from TechCrunch that just hits the nail on the head. It says, Apple, Meta, and Google are locked in a fierce battle to lead the next wave of AI, and they've recently increased their focus on hardware. And that's exactly it. The biggest names in tech are all fighting for the top spot. But the new front line in this battle, it's not just software anymore. It's about embedding that intelligence directly into the hardware we actually use.
And you can totally see the battle lines being drawn, right? On one side, you've got Apple pushing the Vision Pro and AirPods. Then there's Meta with its Quest headsets and those Ray-Ban glasses. And of course, Google is weaving AI into everything from its Pixel phones to Nest devices. This whole Q.ai deal, it's Apple's big move to give its hardware some unique tricks that the competition just can't copy.
So, this all leads to a really big question, doesn't it? While everyone else seems to be racing to build these enormous cloud-based AIs, Apple is pouring billions into making the devices right here, the ones in your pocket, on your ears, on your face, smarter. So, is this hardware-first strategy? Is that Apple playing a totally different and maybe smarter game than its rivals? Definitely something to think about.